Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dudley Recital Hall on the campus of the University of Houston in the School of Art. Tonight we wrap up our speaker series from this academic year. We have the sixth speaker this evening, and we've had a great lineup this year, starting last November with writer and critic John Yao, who was then followed by art historian Dr. Julia Guernsey, who was followed by artist Candice Lynn. Then we took a break and came back in February and heard from artist Sama Al-Shaibi, and then graphic designer Ramon Tejada. And tonight we get to listen to Rubén Ortiz-Torres. And to introduce Rubén, I'm going to introduce Professor John Reed.
Thank you, Becca.
Hi, thanks for coming. Intimate crowd tonight. Rubén threatened that I should not give a long introduction because he's actually going to go over all that. So I'm going to try to really. I also lost my reading glasses on the way here, so I'm only going to go over the things that have really big words and are circled. Rubén's work spans a wide variety of mediums. He's very fluid, moving through mediums, and of course very interesting to IPEF from that point of view. Since the early 1980s, he has produced a wide-ranging body of work and is associated with the development of a specifically Mexican form of postmodernism. His work is in the collections of the Museum of Modern Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, LACMA, Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, Art Space, San Antonio, blah, 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 blah. Reina Sofia, I didn't want to leave that out. And many museums, also many grants. Skipping over all that. He studied architecture at the Harvard Graduate School of Design and art at the Academy of San Carlos in Mexico City. Received his MFA from California Institute of the Arts, and now teaches at one of my favorite places, UCSD, University of California, San Diego. Rubén's conceptual work explores historical narratives and cultural intersections influenced by anarchy, punk, Chicanx culture, and minimalism. And with that very brief introduction, help me welcome Rubén Ortiz-Torres.
Well, thank you, John. And well, first of all, I guess I should not forget, I would like to thank, John and the University of Houston for inviting me to be here. Where I actually have good friends. I want to thank Roberto Tejada that is here, Saul, also Saul Hernandez, who's a student, and anyway, a lot of friends that I have here. And I was just remembering that the first time I show outside Mexico was actually here in Houston. I remember taking the bus in Mexico City and taking the bus all the way to downtown Houston. In what I thought was a very crazy trip. So perhaps some of the, again, as I said to John, yes, I don't need to, all this stuff, all this crap is gonna be here, sort of somehow in this presentation. Okay, what I'm gonna present today is that, recently, a few years ago, I had a retrospective. I had a big retrospective show in Mexico City that was going to travel to the US. But the show didn't travel. Eventually, as you guys know, everything got closed. And all of a sudden we were in the middle of a plague, right? And so the show didn't come. I was very frustrated. And then I didn't know what to do. And so I ended up, I couldn't go to the studios. The studios were closed. And I couldn't produce work as I regularly produce it. And it seemed that there was not even a point to make objects that nobody could actually see, that they could be transported, or like that they could be presented for an audience. So I thought at the time that maybe this would be an opportunity for me to actually learn how to use certain programs and work digitally and make a book. At the time, I had made a couple of books. I made the catalog for that retrospective exhibition, but I was very frustrated that this big book would not really have distribution. It took like a couple of years for it to even get to Amazon. Everything became really complicated. So then at the time, I also made another book that was printed in a Riso machine. And so I figured out that it was a lot easier to make, to self-publish something. And then that I could be in charge of the distribution, and I could make happen a lot easier. So this is, so when I guys show you the result of all this experimentation and all these things, and that we will see today. Yeah, I don't think there's a point of describing. I'm going to show you guys. I'd rather show it to you. I guess I just want to say something. It was brought to my attention that the book is about these times, right? It's about, but it's not so much about these times. It's about my work. It's about the history, my personal histories. It's a way to revisit some of the work is actually similar than the work that you would see in the catalog, but it's remixed. I reuse it. I worked on it. I redesign it. I recontextualize it and present it in different ways. So somehow, somewhere there is about the time. And so this time, so I want to just want to give a warning. There would be graphic depictions of people with masks. That I think it's as I was told, this could be a touchy subject in Texas. And I think there's one image of a vaccine, but I think there's just one, and it's secondary. It's part of the larger narrative that has to do actually more with, well, I guess with I don't know, with life, death, and the political things that affect that. So let's see what we have here. So this is the cover of the book, which, as you guys can see, it's also the cover of another book, right? So this is the cover of my book that is based on the cover of Camus, Albert Camus' book, La Peste, right? So anyway, so here we go. This is the book. As you guys can see, I mean, the book is not even published, but I assume it will be in libraries. And this is actually again, from La Peste, the edition that I was able to find of La Peste of Camus that belonged to the Library of Santa Cruz. The title of the book, like Here Comes the Plague, in Spanish is actually a very recognizable title. Ahí viene la plaga is the title of a rock and roll song that I grew up with it. The rock and roll song is actually Good Golly Miss Holly. I don't know why the hell the lyrics in Spanish had to do with the plague, but somehow they have to. I mean, they invented these lyrics, which actually you guys can read there. Here comes the plague, it likes to dance. Here comes the plague, it likes to dance. And when it's rock and roll, it's the queen of the place. Again, that's a lot of these rock and roll songs that we grew up with were actually hits that were originally sang in English, but for some reason the lyrics in Spanish were totally different. And then this is a piece of mine that I actually did some time ago. It was milled by a robot, actually, and it has this chromalucent paint. These are materials that I use a lot today. It uses this car paint that shifts color, depending from the point of view. But it's what the hell is going on there? Well, it comes from a scan. In a weird way, it's kind of a self-portrait. It turns out that I have this disease on a kidney, right? So I replicate the disease. It's called polycystic kidney disease. And so based on that scan, I replicate the. This is a painting that has polycystic kidney disease, right? The painting is the shape is different. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have the shape of a kidney because it's adapted to the shape of the painting. So it's as if the painting have this disease. All right. So this is long time ago, probably even before I met Roberto. My mother used to have that disease, right? So that's a drawing I did of my mother. And my mother died of that disease when I was relatively young. I was probably in my 20s. And then the image to the right is actually an exhibition that I did at this gallery called OMR Gallery in Mexico City that was supposed to be this gallery of contemporary art and modern art. And so I was trying to, I did these pieces that, as you guys can see, have references to modernism and have all these modernist shapes. But as you guys can see, you also have these floral patterns. I mean, this kind of like pattern painting, I guess. The paintings are painted with encaustic on wood, and the encaustic was also hardened with copal. And so when the copal and the wax burn, it would produce this particular smell that often that is used in religious rituals and in Mexico, and also associated with, I suppose, with the dead somehow. All right. So here's again, there's some of those paintings on the left. And I guess somehow, even though it's very modern, I mean, I was trying to do this sort of, again, this contemporary painting. I guess it's somehow a version of a Day of the Dead shrine of some kind. The drawing on the right, again, it's a drawing that I did after she died. My mother appears on the panel in the further right. She used to sing in a folk band. It was called Los Folcloristas. She used to sing Mexican music and Latin American music. And she used to wear these local, they're called huipiles, right? These indigenous suits dresses that are mostly known now because Frida Kahlo also wore huipiles. At the time, actually Frida Kahlo wasn't that well known. And I remember that we would go see Frida Kahlo's work because my mother liked the dresses, right? And so the dresses and the floral patterns, this piece, it was funny because my mother used to wear these clothes, and then I believe this photograph was taken with her band, but somehow the photograph was used by a company to sell cookies, which was like the weirdest thing. Like one time we saw that in this cookie box. Yeah, I mean, all sorts of personal art. I remember when I did this drawing, I really didn't want, I showed it in a gallery. They told me how much it was worth. I wanted to inflate the price because I wanted to keep it. And so I put a price that for me was like the most expensive price ever. And I just said $1,000. And eventually some woman from Texas bought it, actually. I believe in Dallas. I've been trying to find it because I would want to recover it, but I don't know where it is. Anyway, this is a drawing of a friend of mine, probably Roberto might remember him, who was a curator. Was a young curator in Mexico that died of AIDS in the 80s. And so I came with him to Houston when I came for the first time. I had a show in this place called Diverse Works, and I don't know if it still exists. At the time, there was this guy, Michael Peranzo, used to be the director. And somehow, Rubén had a very particular story. Rubén was his name, Rubén Bautista. He had traveled. I mean, he was from San Miguel Allende, actually, which is a town I was just talking about. And it's a town with a lot of expats. A lot of Americans live there. And so somehow he befriended this gay couple of Americans that had an art collection. And he became interested in arts and eventually was able to travel to Europe and get a grant. And so Rubén he came to Mexico like knowing all these artists that we didn't know, and he had the first shows of German Expressionism. He was a friend of Joseph Beuys. He had met all these people in Europe. He lived in Amsterdam. He worked in the Whitechapel Gallery in London, but then unfortunately, eventually he got sick, and he didn't tell us. He didn't tell me that he had AIDS. He just told me that he had cancer. And I had an uncle that was an oncologist. So I told him that I would call my uncle and that somehow we could help him. But eventually he told me that no, that he had AIDS. And I didn't even know, much about his private life. And at some point he wanted me to make a portrait of him. And this is the painting that resulted from that portrait. I did those drawings that you guys saw. The drawings were actually done with ballpoint pen, and as he was laying in bed before dying. And so this is the kind of artwork that I was doing in Mexico City. I put this page here because I noticed that at some point after there were like 100,000 deaths related to COVID, there was this big page in the New York Times and this big announcement. The page on the right shows when the New York Times announced that there were 100,000 deaths of COVID, of AIDS. So it appeared on the 18th page, and there was just a brief note, and it was barely mentioned, right? But anyway, so these are drawings that I started doing, finding things, and I also started doing, I was doing these self-portraits, and again, for the longest time I used to be making, these sculptures and paintings and doing these big projects. But with this, now it was a time to reacquaint myself with basic things, with drawing, collaging, doing more personal stuff. So these are sketches, drawings and sketches that I was making some of them in my iPad, actually. Some of these are digital drawings. Some of them are real drawings, just done in sketchbooks. And so I was just making all these images. That's on the right, it's my daughter. That's my daughter, Valentina. All of a sudden, all the family, we had to be all there together. And then Valentina was bored, and then she started playing with makeup. And she did this makeup that I really like. The piece on the left is a piece that I did for this exhibition that was supposed to be an exhibition about small pieces, I don't remember the name of the show, but it's something that had to do with working in a very, very small scale. So I made these little sculptures based on these figurines that I would get from machines where you would put 25 cents. And then I got that one from, I suppose it's Princess Leia. And I was making these variations on this woman crying, right? Which of course I always think on this Picasso series that he did during the Civil War. And then my daughter painted herself crying, but her version, of course, is like Picasso. It looks a lot more pop, right? It looks like that's my daughter's bedroom, right? So I don't know. So I was taking photographs with her, and usually she doesn't let me, but this time, for some reason, she let me take these photos. I also did, before this, I did a project working with piñatas, which for me was a very fast way to actually produce collages and make these three-dimensional collages, because I could cut them and create and remake. And I did these big installations. In this case, I'm not showing the big installation. The big installations had a lot of people, because this big installation with all these, collages, but now it's this, again, these images. I also, the drawing on the right, I guess the drawing collage on the right, also is made with parts of piñatas, right? So I kind of like, because the piñatas, you break them and then they get destroyed, but then you can reuse all the stuff that is destroyed and reuse it and sort of remake it. And of course, this, there's a reference to Picasso, but also to, I suppose, to Posada. Anyway, of course, all of a sudden, I had to be in Zoom. All the classes were in Zoom. And I this is actually a composer. It's actually this Italian composer that studied at UCSD. But so I'm in his committee. We were debating his PhD, and I realized I thought that being in Zoom was a really easy way to draw because you just have the face and they don't know that you're drawing people and you can draw very well. So I started drawing and making all these portraits on Zoom, and so I have all these sketchbooks of all these people that I was drawing, and anyway. I found these images too. I found these images of, these are medical books from the 19th century, and in these books they are actually illustrations of syphilis, but because syphilis like changes your face, and I was thinking that it was kind of awkward because we were living into this plague, but I wouldn't see anything. Like, where is it, right? Because everything is happening inside in the lungs. Unlike my friend that died of AIDS, that it was very visible to me how he lost weight and his face changed. And so here there was this is the opposite. This was a very visible thing. And again, I was playing with portraiture, and I was playing also with remembering some painters that I always liked, that this kind of figurative expressionist thing. People from Bacon to a lot of Spanish paint. I used to like this guy Saura. He's not very well known in the U.S., or also even somebody like de Kooning, for example, how de Kooning works with figuration and the matter. He's doing something figurative, but it's all about the matter, right? The texture, the material, the painting. And so I was doing these collages, but as you guys can see, there's also something about the matter of paint and the body, right? And how the body transforms and gets altered, and I suppose depending on how we see these dyes, but it's also creating a different form of life, right? Because we're dying, but these other organisms are living, I guess. And so there's this, I start getting this process. Well, when somebody dies, something dies, something gets born, something, there's just this transformation, right? Anyway, so here we have these drawings that I was playing, some more abstract than others, some more gruesome, I guess. Finding all these diseases and working with those things as painterly material, and try to design. And well, again, syphilis. Obviously there's also these other ethical and sexual connotations. Anyway, so I made these images. And here again, this is again going back to class. These are my colleagues, and some of them are artists and people that you guys might know. Some of them there, but I'm having Zoom meetings with them, and I'm just drawing them. By the way, I have a couple of drawings of you, Roberto. I didn't include them in the book, but I'll show them to you. So I don't know. Don't trust me when I'm on Zoom. This was interesting. This was this group of Chicano artists that wanted to make this Zoom group. A bunch of them are from Texas, actually. A lot of these guys are from Texas. On the right, I don't know if you guys know him. He lives in Houston. His name is Vincent Valdez. I called him. He said that he was sick and he couldn't come. He's a figurative painter, actually. He's a realistic painter. And on the left, there's this guy, John Valadez. Jim Mendiola, who's a filmmaker from San Antonio, too. So all these Chicano guys, except one Canadian guy. It's Seb Sebulon. I don't know why he was part of the group. He was very funny. And I forget the name of the guy that is with the dark glasses, but he's very well known in San Antonio. So anyway, it was interesting because in a weird way, the distance, also geography became, I don't know, it was easier for me. I was looking, I would see these people from San Antonio often, right? Or people from Mexico City, because I will see. This is also another composer who studies in UCSD, and this is again her PhD. My sister is a composer, so I get to be invited to a lot of PhDs of composers. and she's a really good composer from Mongolia, does contemporary music. So again, this is another guy. His name is, you see, there's a student of mine that he works with. He taught me that there's these cactuses where there's these insects, and the insects, they make this thing that is called cochinilla. Like, you know, it seems to be an infection of the cactuses. But if you squeeze the infection, it produces this red pigment. And the red pigment, again, you can draw, if you make it more acidic, if you put lime juice, it becomes darker purple. And if you put more, no, I actually think it becomes more brick color, it's like the orange. But if you add something that is more alkaline, like whatchamacallit, like some alkaline solution, it becomes darker purple. Anyway, so I was drawing with that material and making these portraits of him. Okay. So anyway, so I was walking through the neighborhood, and I would see these things, right? Like all of a sudden, there's this message, referencing health workers, and all of a sudden I guess there were marches on the streets because of these incidents of police brutality against African Americans. So I started taking photographs. I went to the marches. I was going to the marches and taking photographs, and then seeing these resemblances between the masks and then here, wearing these marches in Los Angeles, right? And then again, I was doing these drawings. But for me, it was like a weird flashback because it reminded me when I grew up, certain important events in my life where I also produced artwork that were the Mexico City earthquake or the Los Angeles riots in 1992. And how, well, in this case, again, making these drawings and this collage. I started looking a lot at Goya because Goya's, particularly the series of the Caprichos, right? This series where Goya makes these really amazing etchings about these absurd political situations, and they seem to resonate with me, with images that I was looking in the media. Again, this is on the right. We have these piñatas that were part of the installation. These collages were produced with Trump piñatas that were very popular in Los Angeles. At some point, well, in Mexico even more. And then making these collages with, finding these Goya images. And of course, I thought that in a way, the Goya's etchings are it's very personal work. Like, it's work that he did. He used to do these big commissions that would pay for the bills, like, these tapestries. Then he would make his dark paintings. They were just for him. And then the etchings were this more personal kind of work so anyway, so I did this collage. This one, well, I guess you can get the general idea. But this one is also very personal because it has all these personal jokes that for someone from Mexico City might have meaning, because Goya, it's also the chant of the university. And it turns out that there were these Goya products that Trump was advertising in the White House. And also it turns out that my dog is called Goya, so my dog appears also in one of the collages. So this one has all this personal narrative, which is a little bit crazy. I made that, I don't even appear in that. It's Goya self-portrait. I inserted myself. So here we have this Goya thing. Then I did this. I started also doing these interventions and making collages, and then I did my version of this of the Gadsden flag, I guess. And so I made a version of that, and the version of a lot of these things, a lot of these images, I had them circulating in different ways. So this one, for example, I ended up making a T-shirt, and so this is my daughter wearing the T-shirt, but it circulated I actually want to make a real flag, and I want to, I want to have them take, which again is here, for example, this is a collage that is based on this John Hartfield's photo montage on the left. And on the right, it's a photo montage of, it's also based on an Alvarez Bravo modernist photograph. But again, the only image, the images that really would show damage, the damage of like COVID damage, are actually X-rays, because the damage is all in the lungs. You don't see it outside. So these are actually X-rays of COVID lungs. But again, I mean, the original piece of Hartfield has an X-ray where you can see Hitler eating silver, I guess silver turning into, and the one of Alvarez Bravo is an X-ray. But here, you know, again, you could see this. They use X-rays of patients that actually have COVID. This is a different version. Again, Alvarez Bravo on the left and John Hartfield on the right. The John Hartfield of the right, the collage on the right, it's made of all these presidents that eventually got COVID because they were not wearing masks. And so it's Boris Johnson, Bolsonaro from Brazil, and Donald Trump. I think eventually I thought, well, what, I was thinking that in Mexico, López Obrador also eventually got COVID, but not at the time. He got it afterwards. Otherwise, Obrador would have probably appeared here too, but at the time he wasn't there. So this image is actually also circulated. There was a curator from Barcelona that invited me. Like said, well, she asked me if I wanted to participate in this project, where I would have to create this black and white image to be reproduced, to be just printed in a Xerox machine, and that it would be pasted on different cities in the world. And in exchange, I would have to paste the work of other artists in Los Angeles. So I liked the project, and I went to in Los Angeles. I pasted the work of this guy actually, who's an English. He sings in a band that is called what's the name of the band? Liars, I believe. I forgot. But there's this band. Anyway, I pasted those, and then the collage that you guys saw, where Hartfield appears, was pasted in Medellin, in Colombia, by this artist called Tatiana Zambrano, and also in Barcelona, right? So some of these, we see here images either from Los Angeles that I pasted, Medellin, and Barcelona, which I thought was interesting because, again, how these images were circulating digitally and could exist in materialized in different places. This is a collage that I make with an article that I just saw in Facebook that somebody posted that said, as you guys can read, that the coronavirus sounds a little bit like Zappa's music. And I don't know how they did it. Like, they figured that some DNA information of the coronavirus, if you play music with it, like it sounded like Frank Zappa. And I'm a big Zappa fan, so I couldn't let him pass. I made that collage. This is a collage that I use. It comes from a codex. The images come from a codex. I believe it's called Codex Cruz, and again, is this codexes where the Aztecs and the were portraying smallpox, because at the end, smallpox was this. It really was what defeated the Aztecs, more so than well, it was the Spaniards and also the tribes that allied with Cortés. But smallpox played a very big factor. So it appeared, it was reproduced. I mean, there's all these drawings drawn by Tlaquilos, right? These indigenous artisans or artists, and so it comes from there. And then I created this thing, and on the right we have this spreading, right? I mean, it's actually it's a microscopic image of the virus. And then all sorts of things were happening in LA. These marches were not just there were marches. There were the marches that were in protest of police brutality against African Americans, but there were also marches that had to do with that were people marching for immigrants' rights. And so DACA, the Dreamers were marching, but they were marching on cars because it was for some reason, I guess it had to do with safety and distance, and so cars they were this custom. They would march on cars. these again, references to the marches and the codexes, and a painting that I did in the 80s, where I juxtaposed the image of Chief Wahoo from the Cleveland Indians on top of this Olmec head, and which is a piece that I remember when I went to CalArts, I discussed a lot with Michael Lasher, right? Because it was like, not that I was particularly aware, but somehow obviously involved this questioning of representation in popular culture and these kind of racist representations. The new version that I just presented here in this collage, it has Chief Wahoo being sort of censored because now the guy is not even, it doesn't appear anymore. And then again, like the t-shirt or like some of the other pieces, this piece ended up existing as some public artwork when I, for an art fair, we designed these bus stops. So all of a sudden for me, the book is not just, it wasn't existing just on paper, which in fact doesn't even exist on paper yet. It will supposedly this month, but it already had a presence on the streets in different parts of the world in different ways. So the book was becoming like a form of public art. This is a piece that I also did. I did this series of baseball caps in the 90s. But again, they are sort of recontextualized in this relief that is part of the Monument of Independence in Mexico, but that has been defaced by these feminist protesters, because there were also incidents of police brutality in Mexico. But in Mexico, the police brutality, instead of being directed against African Americans, the issue was not so much race, but it was a gender issue, that there were cases of police brutality against women. And so feminists were protesting, and they took these monuments that also were intervened. And then here, well, you guys probably are familiar with that character. That seemed to me like this guy was doing this kind of performance, and the guy in itself was kind of a collage. Often people were talking about him in relation to being him like a Viking, like wearing a Viking helmet, this guy that intervened the Capitol. But I remember that it looked to me like more like a buffalo dancer, like this Native American dancer. So I found these images of Edward Curtis on the left, and then this other image, and then I keep remixing and collaging and doing this thing. And then eventually I also did this thing. It also came to me that, he looked like a bull, and so I did here this kind of American version, I guess, of Guernica. And the icon, well, you guys have seen the progress of the icons. And there's an image that, this one is new. This one is very intense. It's very intense to me, at least. When I saw this image reproduced, it really bothered me. It bothered me because it brought a lot of memories to me. And it seems that the memories, I was looking at something different, because I saw a lot of African Americans complaining of the image on the right, thinking that this image would remind them of images that had to do with slavery and plantations. But to me, it just brought all this history of Westerns. It was an image that I had seen in Westerns. It's an image that I see often on the border. Every time I cross the border, I have to be reminded of these situations. And it's also an image that actually really even brought me back from the conquest. Because again, this idea of the man in the horse against the local population. So I made this image. And then I had this title. The title actually comes from my first movie. I made this little movie when I was a kid that was a Western. It was called The West is a Pest. It was supposed to be a pacifist Western. It's really funny. You guys can see it online. I'm a grammar school kid. And again, I was, as a kid, I obviously wanted to be a cowboy. I didn't want to be, and for me, more the issue in Mexico was that I wanted to wear boots. I didn't want to wear sandals. I hated huaraches, and my mother wanted me to wear huaraches, and I wanted to wear boots. So even those issues come back to me when I look at this thing, in different ways. So anyway, this is an image that it actually comes from the Mexico City earthquake. Because when I was taking photographs during the earthquake, I had to wear a mask because there were all these dead corpses around. And I thought about this image after I did this other one, which is, 40 years afterwards. And I'm also wearing a mask taking photographs on the street for different reasons. But I still saw like a connection of these moments when all of a sudden there are these natural disasters that bring back these social problems that haven't been solved, right? Like the social issues that need to be addressed. This march, this is a march, this immigrant march on the cars where I was taking these panoramic photographs that create this sort of fragmented image of cars. And then I thought on the fragmented image of this car that I work with Salvador Chava Muñoz, who's a law writer originally from Colotlan, Jalisco, but that now lives in San Diego. And so we work on this car that is painted like a border patrol, but it also has this video that has this kind of science fiction narrative. So this is a piece that I did, and I guess is sort of known, and this car appeared with Jay Leno. The car appeared also in a video with Fatboy Slim. But again, here is recontextualized and presented in relation to these other fragmented cars. So, okay, let's see. Again, these other cars going to these marches and the photographs and the zoom. This is actually the editor of the book, who's a past artist. His name is Aitor Lajarin. So I made also a portrait of him. This is also an interesting story and a piece. I mean, here you guys can see, these are studies that I did, but they're about this mural. This mural was made in Los Angeles in the 30s. 1932, David Alfaro Siqueiros, who's this important Mexican muralist, escaping Mexico because he was arrested in Mexico, because he was this radical communist, goes to Los Angeles and wants to make murals. Rivera at the time eventually would go to New York, and Orozco went also to California. And so when Siqueiros goes to Los Angeles, he produces a couple of murals. One in Chonard, and the other one in Olvera Street, which is this one. And so if you guys look at the original mural, which appears here in this sketch, he was actually hired, he was commissioned to Olvera Street, was because, I guess in a way, it's probably the first thematic part, because it was supposed to be this Mexican town to attract tourists to consume things there. It's supposed to be in downtown Los Angeles. But anyway, the woman hired Siqueiros to paint this tropical version of America, right? To paint this, and he did. He painted these ceibas and these tropical trees and a Mayan temple. But what he didn't tell the woman, I forgot the name of the woman, but what he didn't tell her was that he was going to paint, overnight he painted this crucified Indian. He crucified this Indian. And of course, they didn't like the painting. I mean, actually, she didn't like the painting. And the painting was whitewashed, right? Was painted white. But I think Siqueiros was aware of this whole thing. He did it on purpose. I mean, he knew that he was going to create so in a way, he called this guy from the LA Times, which I think Jack London, but I don't think it's the writer. He had the same name. And then, and then these guys to take photographs. And then they took photographs. And then they wrote about, it was almost like this performance thing. And he knew that eventually the painting was going to be defaced. And eventually got covered white. So in my mind, he actually was making the first monochrome painting in Los Angeles, because he knew that eventually was going to be this white painting. So here, this actually is the actual location right now in Olvera Street, where the Getty Center has invested millions of dollars in recovering what is left of the mural. Because the mural obviously now has this history. And for me, the mural is this fascinating place because growing up in Mexico City, where every corner there are archaeologists digging something, Los Angeles, which is a city that claims not to have any history, all of a sudden I have all these experts, I'm not exactly archaeologists, but I have all these restorers working on these ruins of the city. So eventually, Siqueiros Mayan ruins really became like the ruins, the historical ruins of the city, right? That right now had to be rediscovered. But it's also a history of iconoclasm and how, and the relation between abstraction and figuration, right? How modernity sort of erases these complex narratives and these, in creating this kind of a homogenized, universal sort of aesthetic values, right? So here are like just different drawings where I cover what the Siqueiros drawings of them. I also did this thing, which is I started covering Siqueiros mural, and I think this probably should be a series because I want to keep adding graffiti until it becomes this monochrome white painting, right? So here we can see the Siqueiros mural in Olvera Street, but it's covered with graffiti, and the graffiti comes from different sources. Some of the graffiti comes actually from my house because my house is usually tagged by the local gang, which is called the Eco Park Locos. But there's also tags by, some are more recognized, Mara Salvatrucha, there's even Kid Haring, Basquiat, Banksy, and also Roberto might recognize some of my teachers from the art school in Mexico City, Grupo Suma, who used to do street art in the 70s. So I'm just studying, and also there's Señor Suerte, this guy from Chas Bojorquez, who's a graffiti artist from the West Coast that I really like, and also well, there's different graffiti guys, right? So somebody that knows graffiti might recognize them, even more so than me. This is another painting I did, and this relates more to the work that I've been doing recently. So in a way, for me, this is a good excuse. I'm telling you guys a narrative about this book, but it's also a way to talk about my previous work, like giving you general. This is because I've been working a lot with car paint. So I did a painting. This is a painting of the mural. You guys can see America Tropical, but it has it's painted in a way that it's what lowriders or hot rodders call like ghost. It's like they do ghost flames. It's like a ghost paint. So it has an underpainting white, but then it's covered with white on top, and it has this chromalucent paint that shifts color, and it shifts from like purple to greenish. So in order to be able to see this painting, if you look it from a certain angle, it just looks like a white painting. But if you move around, eventually the image of the mural appears from underneath, right? So it's like this ghost painting. I've been working with a lot of chromalucent paint or materials that you touch and change color, and but also come from car culture. This is just an interpretation. I mean, this is just white on white. It's like me making my monochrome print or something on paper. I don't know how that's going to print, but then I also made this series of designs based on, again, the destruction of all these monuments, because at the same time as all these things were happening, Confederate monuments were being removed. And in this case, I was looking at these images of Christopher Columbus or Junípero Serra. The whole idea of monuments was being rethought, right? It's like, how do we construct history? But for me, it's not just that. It's also the relationship between abstraction and figuration, right? Between again, the absence of images, right, or iconography. And so I'm making this kind of variation. I mean, in this case, again, this kind of monochrome paintings based on the image of Columbus, and a lot of these images were appearing on the media. I believe this is in Boston. I don't even know where this was happening, but I was just looking at these images and then making. This is a more convoluted thing. This is like a local story from Mexico. But in Mexico, actually, they took out the monument of Columbus. The government didn't even say, like they say that they were renovating it, and all of a sudden Columbus was missing. And then all of a sudden they decided to invite these local artists to make a sculpture, which is this one, is this thing, it's called Tlali. And so this guy wanted to make supposedly his representation of indigenous woman. And so he created this image that is supposed to be an indigenous woman that to me, it kind of looked like Ultraman. But then they took him out because then everybody protested. Because again, everybody, like women were saying, well, why is this guy making a representation of indigenous woman? He's not indigenous and he's neither a woman, and there was no process of selection. And so at the end, it ended up being worse than Columbus. And actually, I've been now hearing arguments that maybe we should bring back Columbus because actually it's produced by these artists from the 19th century and as a historical monument had some value. But so here what I did is that turns out that also there's this local vedette, this actress from the 50s that used to make these kind of erotic movies, and was this figure called Lin May, who was this Asian Mexican woman. And they invited me. These artists did a session of drawings of her. I couldn't go to the session, but I told them that I would make a collage. And so I made a collage that includes Lin May and Ultraman and Tlali. So anyway, so I did this whole thing. So these are other images that are more, this is a series of work that is more contemporary. It's what the last show that I did is this. That I showed in Los Angeles, and I was because I've been working with car paint. Somehow I started going to junkyards to get car parts, but then at some point that I was customizing in my own way, and I was adding things and doing things and making sculptures. But then somebody told me that there was this junkyard in Tijuana where they just had Tijuana patrols that were actually burned and shot by the cartels. So I went there and I saw the patrols, and somehow I convinced the guy to sell me some parts. And so I bought these parts, and so the door on the left is it was actually shot by the cartel, and it has some gunshots and it's burned. The hood on the right, it's almost like a ready-made. That one I actually didn't really paint. It was just burned like that. So I liked it, and I just actually clear coated it, and it looks like this abstract painting, but it's actually it's a hood of a truck that was burned by the Sinaloa cartel that was in this war with the Tijuana cartel. On the left is a painting that I did based on a photograph on one patrol that was burned during the marches against police brutality. But it also reminded me of the 90s, which probably, I don't know if Esther remembers, but in CalArts, there was an artist that actually exhibited parts of car patrols that were actually shot in the 90s by local gangs in Los Angeles, as well as by, I think they were also burned in the demonstrations, in the Rodney King demonstrations. So again, all these things somehow connected. And then the other element that I should say is that, as I mentioned, the feminists in Mexico were protesting against police brutality. And they were expressing one of the things they were doing in the protest is that they were throwing glitter into the cops. It was called the glitter revolution. They call it the glitter revolution, and they were throwing glitter into the cops. And the glitter was this magenta, was this pink glitter. So I just thought that we use glitter. I use glitter. I mean, lowriders use glitter. It's just not called glitter. We call it metal flake. But all of a sudden, you have these macho guys that actually work with this very feminine material and make this beautiful, sparkling, like shiny painting. So here, there's another element there. I was using lead and silver, which of course also there's this lead and silver are materials that also have this symbolic connotation and related to the drug war. It's like either, there's this Escobar phrase that, I'm going to give you either lead or silver. So I was painting also with lead and silver because I like the materiality, also lowrider cars. So these paintings are done with lead, silver, and glitter, right? Therefore, the title of the exhibition was Plata, Plomo, Glitter, right? It's like, but for me, that's interesting because lead and silver express this power, right? It's either money or violence. But I also think there's another form of power, which is glitter, which is seduction. It might be beauty, right? It's like maybe beauty can be as powerful as money or violence. So these are these other hoods, and I'm also, again, I was covering the logos of the police using these materials, right? So these are different examples of that. This is a photograph from the exhibition, but also you guys can see here the feminists throwing glitter. By the way, I should say that at some point somebody told me that it was a terrible idea to throw glitter because it pollutes and eventually can go into the ocean. But I don't know if the one from Mexico City would make it to the ocean because it's pretty far. But anyway, so just a fun fact there. Here, as you guys can see, some of the patterns, like this is a hood that I painted, and there are the sketches. I make these sketches before I make the paintings. And then the painting actually has lowrider patterns, right? You can see that it's also, we also know how to, I mean, we make these patterns that, they can be very careful. I mean, there are these abstractions and these kind of more sort of concrete or constructivist references, but also, sometimes we can do actually lowrider patterns. And these are more like abstract paintings that also using glitter. These are the feminists, this defacing, destroying a patrol car. This is actually in Guadalajara. But man, they are fierce. And then there's well, again, some of I did this, the hood I painted. So yeah, this I kind of, I like somehow the feminists enter into, there's this building, there is a building of human rights, I believe. And then in the building had these paintings of Mexican heroes, right? One of them is this guy Madero, which is like a president from the revolution. And the feminists just defaced them, just got the paintings and did, I guess, their feminist intervention of that. So I decided to make my intervention of their intervention. So in my intervention of their intervention, I included details of my daughter's makeup that you guys saw before. But anyway, so it's like Madero in makeup, and my daughter, and all these flowers, and there you guys go. These paintings sort of remind me, they're like situationist paintings, no? Like Asger John, when he used to buy these, paintings on street markets, and then he would paint on top and intervene them. It's just that these ones have different layers, right? Again, these heroes, Morelos, which by the way was this African-American independence hero in Mexico, and then Hidalgo. But then I collaged them. Well, they defaced them, and they already make this anarchist version of that, and then I just added to it, and I actually added a photograph, Day of the Dead photograph by, I believe, it's like a Nazca photograph. It has fragments of a Nazca photograph, and the one on the right has also. It's funny because it's Miguel Hidalgo, this hero of the independence. But there's a death metal singer. There's this crazy singer in Tijuana. They call it El Muerto, like El Muerto from Tijuana. And so the album cover, these guys actually did the makeup that he wears on the hero, and then I took the cover and added it into this thing. And so these collages that. This one is kind of weird too because it's also Benito Juárez, this Mexican hero that Saul might know. But it's also making reference to a painting that I did of Benito Juárez when I was in school. And so it has my painting of Benito Juárez with the face painting that they did. And I also defaced my Benito Juárez as they defaced the Benito Juárez. So it's, again, this whole game about destruction of, iconoclasm and this is a different, a version of that photograph, sort of repainted with a baseball cap that I did in the 90s after the Rodney King's. And these baseball caps eventually became art. I was wearing them, but eventually are collected now and are in museums. And this is a crazy. This is as you guys can see, it's a flag barbecue. that I did the 4th of July of 2017. And then with the ashes, I made ink. So with the ashes, actually, I made flags. So actually, I burned a flag, but it reproduced. I created these lithographs, and I made ink, and I also made a painting. So in a way, it's like this kind of like phoenix flag, like that sort of gets to be burned from the ashes. So the two pieces on the left resulted from those ashes. One is a painting, and one is a lithograph. The painting is like it's encaustic, actually. So in a way, it's like Jasper Johns encaustic. But for me, it was also, to be honest, it was also a way to make the flag mine, because it is a black flag, right? And as I became a citizen, I also wanted to make my a version of, okay, what is this flag is supposed to represent freedom, right? It's supposed to represent liberty and freedom. And I was also thinking in the black flag, the anarchist flag. But the anarchist flag, again, is this abstraction that is supposed to be the negation of symbols. But then as the negation of symbols, it becomes a symbol of the negation of symbols. So again, it's this game of representations that I remember when I was studying semiotics in CalArts, and they would say to me, well, Jasper Johns, is that a flag or is that a representation of a flag? Because a flag is a representation, right? So that was the big semiotical game. And here, what I don't know is like, is this the negation of, is this the negation of symbols, or is this a symbol of the negation of symbols? Which forces to think, can we even escape symbols? Is the possibility abstraction even possible? Which I don't even know, because we immediately attach meaning to things, and depending on the context. The images on the right are again very similar to the painting by the Siqueiros painting. They are ghost flags. Depending on the light, you can see the flag or not, right? One of them is polychrome and the other one is monochrome. The one on top you can see blue and red. By the way, the one on the top is actually right now in the Smithsonian Museum. So again, there's this, and then the page on the left is actually a page, right? It's a black page in the book. And then I had all these black images that appear on Instagram that day, because supposedly it was like this Black Tuesday thing. And so I was thinking that this was this monochrome, again, abstraction, monochrome, the Malevich, finally the black, arriving to the black abstraction and the negation of images was a way to, now it was becoming again this symbol and was attached meaning to it, and it was becoming something that it wasn't abstract. This one is the painting on the right is very hard to see. It's supposed to be the blackest flag because I painted it with the blackest black in the market, which is not the blackest black, because the blackest black, supposedly Anish Kapoor has it, is the Bata black, and he doesn't share it, and I cannot use it. But, well, even though I guess in UCSD they have their version of the blackest black, but it's very difficult to use. So this is actually this guy in England that makes the blackest black in the market that everybody can buy except Anish Kapoor. He doesn't sell it to Anish Kapoor. So it's actually a very dark black, but it's so dark, it's very fragile, so you don't even want to touch it, because everything you do with it marks it. It looks like this velvety thing. But and also this, when I was posting these images on Instagram, they got recycled. I found out that this woman in France was making these mosaics with it. She was this Afro-French artist that liked the blackest flag, and so she was recycled. So I like how this thing was circulating in media, and so again, oops, I guess I'm going wrong. Okay, so this we're getting to the end. Here is just a mosaic of black paintings that I like. Of course, I teach painting, and one of the first things I tell them is like, don't use black. It's like, please make your own blacks. But here, of course, there's a lot of artists that I like. Malevich, Goya, Kerry James Marshall, Rauschenberg, Motherwell, Beatriz Zamora, monochrome artists, name them. I have one of the pieces, the top right painting is one that I made burning flags from 6 different countries. Like I burned a bunch of like Six Flags. And then again, my neighborhood, well, I kind of altered some of this. It was like Black Lives Matter, but I just added Blacks Matter, Black Flags Matter. You know, made these things. And these photographs is also that I was taking on the marches. And this is another baseball cap that I did when I was in CalArts that I was just wearing it. That kind of was a provocation because my teacher told me that I was wearing ethnic caps because I was wearing all these Mexican caps. And so he got me a Malcolm X cap. And I thought, I'm gonna wear it, but I make it mine again. So I invented this Malcolm X cap and I ended up in a show. I didn't even saw it as an artist. But here's the book ends, right? My father died also during this time. He didn't die of COVID. He just died because he was old, but it turns out he died. And this is the last drawing I made of him, the last time I saw him. So I have this little sketch of him, which I wanted to include. And so here's kind of like the end of the book. And now, so kind of like in those movies where everything is finished, and then it turns out that it's not finished, and then it appeared. And then at some point, yes, the vaccine appeared. This is a controversial shot of it. So it appeared, and as you guys saw, I'm actually a high risk, considered high risk patient. So they gave me this thing as soon as they could. And then that was supposed to be, that's all, folks. But then it wasn't. Then I got these 3 vaccines. Then it turns out that I went to Mexico because I had to go to this art fair. And then I got COVID because it was this crazy event, and there were like this big party, and there were all these dinners, and you had to take out the mask because you had to eat, and it was like this gala thing in the Tamayo Museum. And so I ended up having, because I'm a high-risk patient and whatever, I had to be like 20 days in quarantine, and it was this whole issue. And so, because I'm a high-risk thing, they took me to this monoclonal antibody treatment, right? Which is supposed to be, this sort of enforces your antibodies, which is actually what they did to President Trump. And I asked them, is this the thing that you guys did to President Trump? And they say, yes. I said, okay, give it to me, but just without the Clorox. And so I was joking with these nurses. And the nurses, we started chatting, and then I found out that they didn't have medical insurance. And that they didn't have medical insurance. One was from Nigeria, and the other one was from Cameroon. And I assumed the reason why they didn't have, I didn't talk as much, but I assumed they didn't have insurance because they are probably immigrants. And so again, I don't know, I mean, it's just that it ends up like this fotonovela thing. But again, it's like this, a lot of the work that I've done and a lot of the story in the book, I mean, again, these issues that have to do with economics and have to do with politics and actually colonialism. So that's his little story and some of my life and some of my work. That's it. I don't know if you guys have any questions. How are we doing with time? Is this too soon? Because I could show more work, or if it's enough, it's enough. I don't know if you guys have questions.
I think we're good. No.
All right. So not too long, not too soon. All right. So I don't know. I don't know if you guys have any questions, either about the work or the process of making a book that now I guess I know, or anything. Yes.
I mean, thank you for showing this. I mean, I'd seen parts of this before. Didn't know the last epilogue with COVID in Mexico. But seeing it all together now, I mean, in a way, maybe you could talk somewhat about the artist's book as a form. Because what your work, if it is about one thing in particular, it's about the destructive nature of history, especially histories in the Americas, beginning with the conquest. And yet this is a very intimate book. So in a sense, it's kind of a memoir, a visual memoir, or kind of a journal of the plague years, but it's also, it is also kind of snapshot of the historic present and the kind of catastrophes of the last 2 or 3 years. What do you make of the artist book form as maybe one of the most intimate? Yes, we're seeing it in a PowerPoint, but ideally, I'm imagining you really want it to be something that you hold in your hands and experience in a particular way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the whole process. I mean, I should say one thing. What I really want is that this would exist. So in a way, this is a very simple thing. It's so simple, Roberto, that it's just letter size. You know, it's like 8.5 by 11 inches, and you know, it's as simple as it gets, because I just want it to be published somehow in the cheapest possible way. I recognize that the idea of artist book also embodies very unique. You know, you can experiment with the format and make something that it's just one of a kind, and you can do something very unique. Before this, I made this book that you might have seen, that is somewhere in between. It was done on a Riso. We made 100. An edition of 100, and it's this collection of punk photographs that I took in the 80s, printed in color paper, kind of like the ways we would reproduce flyers or like a fanzine. It just the book is printed on very nice. It's color paper, but it's a little bit thick, and then the cover is seal screened, and it has a couple of metallic rings that make the book. The book, you can make it's a book, but it's also like an exhibition. It's like a portfolio, because you can open it and just get a collection of, I believe, are 40 photographs or 50 photographs. I don't remember. So in a way, I think that this idea of the artist book as something that has a unique form that can become more sculpture. I mean, today I saw some beautiful samples of one of the students. Like, you know, I was looking at this thing that, you know, goes backwards and forwards and has binder, like, you know, you can make this. I was thinking, this is a wonderful sculpture. The one that I did is not like that, because I just want it to be printable, like, you know, just make it as easy as possible so I can print it. Now, saying that, within that is very intimate, the process, because I'm drawing, I'm making and also the content it's something more intimate, and I'm thinking. It is a book, Roberto, but I'm thinking in graphic work. I'm thinking in Posada, I'm thinking in Daumier, I'm thinking in Goya. I'm thinking in these political graphics that people put out there, and you know, that they existed, they had an edition, and they could be seen, and they could deal with an issue quickly. They address specific, they are produced for a specific moment in a particular time, and yet they are still universal, and they are talking about larger problems, right? So I was thinking in them. Of course, this is a book. How do we make images circulate? Some of them circulated as posters, some of them circulated as t-shirts, some of them in the bus stops. But I think this thing can circulate also online. Because in a way, I'm thinking that, I don't know, Goya and Daumier were also making memes. You know, I guess those were the memes of their day. So I think these things might be memes. I mean, are these very serious artworks? I don't know. I mean, I'm just making a cartoon with whoever, you know, making a joke about something. I'm thinking in political cartoons, of course, there's a long tradition in Mexico about them, right? Like, you know, I grew up with all these cartoonists, or Argentina for that matter. But I'm also thinking in memes. I'm thinking in other kind of media, how these images might circulate there. So I think it is a book. It is an artist book, but I think it also has these permutations that have to do with the time, right? So it can circulate in these other ways. I still haven't seen the thing. You know, we're gonna print it. We're gonna print it in in Pasadena. Turns out, I always thought that Mexico was cheaper, but I made a mistake. I told them that it was 8 by 11 or something. And then they gave me a quote in centimeters. So when I figured out it was four times more expensive, it's like 8 by 11. Like how in Mexico, like photography, it's measured in inches. So it's 11 by 14. I thought that these guys, 11 by 8, and like this is a standard size. We don't use the European sizes. We use it. However, they gave me a quote in centimeters. So anyway, so I want to print it. Paper is more expensive now. Have it and see. I would like to probably keep altering at least a couple, keep making collages on a few of those and make those like real artist books in the sense that they are originals and have the hand of the artist. These ones are artist books in a way, but I don't know. I mean, who define? Like, I'm thinking that I'm cheating because it's just, digital offset. And,
Well, I don't know. I'm thinking of the artist book is a pretty broad category, but I always turn to Ulises Carrion, the Mexican conceptualist, who just said that it's a series of spaces, right? And what the book allows, made by an artist, is that you are able to put these spaces together. It's a kind of collage of historical times that are all in one.
Oh, wow, that's a beautiful description.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful description. I mean, it's funny because I'm working with a designer, and the designer, I did the basic design, but once I inserted text, I have this guy helping me. And he comes, obviously the way he works, there's all sorts of restrictions, right? The colophon does something, and this goes after this, and this goes after this. And he's very, very neurotic about, for example, like when you print, you have to give a certain space, so when you cut the paper, like there's all these rules. And also, for example, the size of the files. That the size of the file has to have a certain quality because otherwise it's not high quality or whatever. And I'm like, dude, it's my book. I like it. Leave it like that, I don't care about the size of the file. It doesn't, who tells you that it has to be that? No, because it has to. Why? I'm the client. Forget about it. Just do it. There's no, I don't have that restriction. I can have 3 endings. There's an ending and an ending and an ending. Just put it there. I can have 2 pages wide. There are logic for these things. But in this case, as you said, these are spaces and they have to do with time. And I decided, we can play with that. So in that sense, even though the structure is relatively straightforward, right? And again, it's a book. There's just images. There's no. The text. I have credits at the end. So in case if you guys are interested to know what the hell is going on in this collage and where is this coming from, well, you can go there and see the source and have that information. And there are titles. There are titles for these things, but I guess the idea is that you just can just browse it and see it. Yeah. Which of course is a problem too, because now we're living in times where images are becoming so disposable that I don't even know if we pay attention to it. It's just give me more. I don't care. But yeah. And it's also kind of strange because there are art pieces that are art pieces, but I think here they are treated as images. There are sculptures and there are things that exist physically in a space, but yeah.
I'm curious about the process, because there are collages within the book, the book is kind of like a collage of, chronologically. So are you making the collages cut and paste in physically, like 3-dimensional? Are you using software? Are you making? How are you laying the book out, and how are you making some of the collages in the book?
There's a little bit of everything. Some of the for example, all the piñata collages are real piñata. They are real sculptures. Those things. Well, they wear. They don't last. So they exist now as documentation, as images, because the papier mâché is not the most steady material to make a sculpture. But a lot of them are digital. Most of them are digital. And I have, like, for me, this was an opportunity to, my students are really good at working with digital. Like they use all these programs, Procreate and Photoshop. And I'll be honest, I work mostly with editing, video editing, software, and Lightroom is probably what I use more. So this was really for me like, okay, now I'm gonna just dive into Photoshop as much as I can, and Procreate, and the truth is that the programs that I like better are the ones that are more emulate better the quality of the materials that I know. The ones that I like better are the ones that look like oil painting. I like Art Rage. There's another Japanese program that I forgot its name, but I like them because they look like charcoal looks like charcoal and painting looks like painting. When you use Photoshop and you use the brush that says oil, it looks crazy. It doesn't look like oil. So some of these things look like paintings, and they're actually just digital things. Those are the ones that I like better. But yes, I play, and I also use InDesign, which is obviously not as good to collage, but I did those things. I work a lot with the iPad too. I'm combining an iPad and the desktop, and certain things I think are easier for me. Well, of course, drawing and doing all this stuff with the iPad. I think I really want to have the book because my experience is that a lot of stuff that I do digitally disappears. Something happens and I lose it, and at least, when I have a sketchbook, it drains, it falls in the mud, it changes color, but there's something. There's this mutated thing that still exists. So I want to have a book to, say, okay, if all this disappears, at least I have this. I don't know, I guess I'm still old school in that sense. Yeah.
One funny thing that kept coming up over and over, and that's when you use the pixel blur on things, and I was like, oh, we must be using a copyrighted image. But then I noticed that sometimes that image would show up and not be pixel blurred. And then I was sort of wondering if you like using pixel blur as sort of a way of saying, hey, I'm stealing this, or I don't know, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's...
I like the use of it, but I was trying to sort of figure out
my logic.
your logic with it, yeah.
Well, sorry, I realized I'm off frame. The pixelated image, well, obviously it has that connotation, right? That, censorship, it's blurred. But I really do like how, it's also an abstraction. It's also this grid. It's a grid that I've seen often. When I teach painting and I teach color theory, I go through Eaton's elements of color, and his explanation, all his examples of color are like these grids with little colored squares. So I like the form. And I cheat because some of them are really, like some of the paintings, I have an image underneath. Like in the case, there's probably two places where I use it. I use it one is the Tijuana Patrol symbol, and then I blurred with, I pixelated. And so it is the Tijuana Patrol pixelated, even though there's a couple of ringers, because there's one of the squares has silver, and the other one has metal flake. So they become abstractions. The other one, I think, the one of the Chief Wahoo is probably more, it's not painted. It's more like this digital, just the pixelation. But I think I like this modern element into something. You had some figuration, and you have this modern thing. Again, I'm really interested in that. I'm very interested in that gray space between signification and abstraction. That one, we know what it means something, but it is an abstraction, right? So it's just that it's very difficult to escape signification. And also, the truth is that I guess in this kind of like post-structuralist way, is all these things have just all these mythological levels, because by the time this thing is in a painting, what does it mean? It means that it's been pixelated, but it also means it's a reference to constructivism and abstract. It's a reference to art. So it goes this,
It's also a reference to stealing something. So it has this kind of like, it would sort of like be like smashing the window of your car so you could drive it around and say that you stole the car you're driving.
You know, I mean,
Well, it could have that.
It has that sort of cool quality.
It has that, and at the same time, it just blocks. No, it's blocking. It's censoring an image. It's. There was an art piece made by a student of mine that I really like. It was. It had all these logos like Puma. I have a T-shirt. Like the one that I have is the Puma logo, and he blurred it because I guess in rap videos they would blur like the company thing. He was very interested in if it was recognizable, if it could be copyrighted, if he would get sued or whatever. I still recognize that it's Puma. Everybody does, but it's blurry. So anyway, you were going to ask something?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to follow up on something you said in the book. These aren't objects, they're images. I think it's an interesting statement. It makes me think about also the public monuments that you showed that were defaced or altered through these acts of protest, and how those images that then you take or appropriate, they're important to acts of preservation, right? They reframe those objects from those monuments through the acts of others. And then your art and your work continues to sort of like reframe and play with them and collage them and bring them together. So I guess I'm curious to hear from your perspective about this act of your work also as a form of preservation of those acts, those public acts of protest, and then also how you are continuing to reframe and complicate and add additional layers to them.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, thanks a lot because I really would like this to do that. I mean, I like those gestures. I don't know if they will be preserved. I mean, I guess there's a memory to the extent that I was able to find these images. I don't know how long would they exist, but at least that they would exist in this context, being seen as something, right? Given a certain kind of attention and prominence. Well, I mean, as much as I would like to romanticize all these strategies, like, you know, detournement and culture jamming and appropriation and remixing and intervening and all these things, the truth is that you know that this is an ongoing game, that I appropriate as much as I will be appropriated. I mean, even the Sex Pistols knew that, right? It was like, what was the title of their money? It's like the Great Rock and Roll Swindle. Like, you know, we are appropriating all these things, but somebody else is gonna make money out of it. Like somebody else is gonna, like you gotta be quick because as I'm doing this, someone else is doing this, right? And it's getting really fast. It's getting really quick. I just directed this symposium of theory and contemporary art, and we invited these kids that were they make memes, these meme maker guys, and the whole argument, everything started because I just heard this podcast that during the pandemic, it was the Wild West for meme makers, that they could there was no regulation, they could do whatever they wanted, so they were making all these critiques and social commentaries and doing whatever really quick. By the time I invited them, they had been expelled by Instagram and TikTok, and the argument was kind of crazy because they were accusing them of producing fake news, but the memes were clearly just humor. They were just provocations, and to be honest with you, like I don't know, it was just adolescent inane humor. I mean, it was just but they were using images that often would come from politics. So obviously Instagram cannot recognize if that's a political commentary, if that's fake news, or if that's a meme, if that's a joke, or that's what. So they just take out everything. So again, I don't know. I mean, these images circulate. I don't know how long they are circulate. They have a meme. I'm careful, and at the same time, I'm scared, to be honest with you, because there are certain images. I don't know. Like, let's say the image of the image that bothered me more, like the one of the patrol with the Haitian guy. I'm making this collage, and for me it has a meaning, but I know that it could be easily recontextualized and used in the opposite way, in the absolute opposite way, and it would bother me a lot. But what can you do? I mean, I suppose if I see it, I would appropriate it again and reuse it again, like, you know. Because this happens. I mean, you know, in some instances, here it was done in ways that, I don't know. I mean, there's this feminist appropriation of these painting, and I did an appropriation of that. Would they like this, or will it bother them? I do not know. I just know that, as they say in Mexico, ladrón that roba ladrón tiene 100 años de perdón. Like a thief that steals to a thief has 100 years of pardon. So at least I'm doing something that they already did, right? And I suppose I would be very glad if they would actually take my version and read. If they would continue this call and response thing, right? Which I guess probably that's how culture works, right? We are just commenting on, we're just responding and seeing things. And I see something, I respond, and I see something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
How was the relation to the editor in making the book, like the decision-making process?
Well, the editor. The relation with my editor is great. He's an artist like me, probably crazier. I guess I tell him, like, let's do this project. Oh, I have an artist space. Why don't we do it? And so my relation with my editor is, how are you going to get the money? Oh, hell, how do we do it? And so he went there and do this Kickstarter page. He obviously is a worse businessman than I am, which is already very bad. So his idea of funding the book is like, let's make these T-shirts. So we can sell the T-shirts and then we'll make the book. But then the T-shirts ended up more expensive than the book, like ended up being very expensive because he wanted like this very fancy T-shirt. So that's my relationship with my editor. In terms of the content, I mean, Esther read an interview that he did with me. He's a very good friend of mine. Maybe if there's something bad about it is that we like the same things. So we have a very similar taste of things and we obsess on very similar things. So we can end up talking about, punk rock and Buñuel and crazy things. And yeah, I don't know. So it's there's not really an editor. But I have had real discussions with real editors. And this book actually comes from those. It comes from the sense that I just hated those discussions. They don't let you, like my experience with editors is that, first of all, in Mexico, a lot of catalogs, our books in general, the business is not so much on the distribution or on the making. The business is in the printing. So they just want to get the grant to print the book. Once the book is printed, they don't care if it rots in, boxes somewhere. So for me, it was always very frustrating because then they want you to fund the book. You have to get an artist book. I mean, a catalog costs a lot of money. It costs like $25,000 or something. So you have to get the grant. You pay them. They produce like 1,500 books. I've worked with better editorials than others. Hanjek Hans actually really distributed the book. The book was everywhere, and it sort of so. But others, I don't know. Black Dog Press, it's an English press. It's supposed to be an art press. It's supposed to be really good. By the time we printed the book, they were bankrupt. So I ended up with like half of the edition in the United States and the other half of the edition is in a warehouse, who knows where. My other problem with Mexico has been a lot with photo books. And I've worked I had this utopian project that never got to be produced because they wanted the best designer and the best paper and the best writer and the best everything. And so never happened. Because nobody, we couldn't land the people that they wanted to. And I've had other situations where they'll do it if you give me $25,000 and we'll print it and then it'll be a beautiful book. But their idea of a beautiful book is their idea of a beautiful book. So we'll have a designer that makes a photo book like all the other photo books. And there's no way we're gonna have a discrepancy with it. And I get really mad because it's like, if I'm bringing my $25,000, why do I have to put up with this white layout with, Helvetica and this thing, right? It drives me nuts. Or for example, when I did the catalog in the university for the retrospective, I have to tell you, I think that graphic design in Los Angeles is really good. They are really good graphic designers, right? And they are experimenting and doing crazy stuff. And in Mexico City, they are super stiff and they try to copy, they are copying Swiss design and Dutch design, and they do this minimalist, modernist, very boring books, at least to my taste. And that don't relate to me. I mean, I think the best Mexican design right now is in Los Angeles, to be honest. because the WineX is super stiff, is super modernist and very constricted. And so I have to pay all this money, get into these arguments. A lot of the work that I mean, you saw the work that I do. I'm messing up with typographies and things, and they have different connotations. And a lot of the typographies that I use come from street, like, old English and gangster this and cholo style. And I write, like, I do my street thingy, and I do all these things, and I combine all this mess, right? When I go there, it's like, no, like, we're going to use this modernist whatever thing, and it drives me nuts. So out of this frustration that I have to pay for something that I don't like, and they put all these conditions, and they don't distribute, I said, damn it. And then at the end, you put all this effort, you spend the $25,000, you get 1,500, they give you top boxes, you end up with like 50 copies, and then those are the ones you distribute. The rest, you don't even know what happens. So if the thing is going to be like that, I prefer this. We'll make 200. This is a small edition. I know we're going to sell it out. This one is really going to sell out. Already we sold 60 copies on Kickstarter. And we're going to take it to a couple of fairs. And I know that it's a small thing, but at least I did what I wanted. There's 3 endings. There's whatever. We use all the things. Things are pixelated. I don't know. We did whatever, and we leave for another day, and then we'll make another one. We're going to recover this money, and either we reprint or I'll produce your book. I like your books. It'll be our editorial, whatever. Let's make it, homeboy editions. Yeah. All right. That was my experience with that. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe I'm too much of a rebel. Yeah. Too much of an indie, of an anarchist. What can I say? Yes.
American politics seems like really wrapped up in energy markets, like in oil. And I was wondering if you ever see your work as exploring the motifs, that contradiction between social justice and like the energy markets that fund a lot of the social programs that happen, and like a lot of activists try and use those windfalls to, I guess, like repress movements like feminism and socialism, and like, because I noticed like a lot of your work, like you have the Blackest Flag, you have that painting with the Shell station and the burned up cars, and it all seems very, I guess, very interesting in how it relates to energy trade with the North particularly.
Uh-huh.
Say something about that, or if I'm wrong, say no.
Wow. Well, I mean, I don't know if I ever thought really in particular to energy trade. I don't see why not. I would make a piece. I mean, usually the way my mind works is that there's these relations or contradictions that I see between form and content and materiality. So just from hearing you, I'm just thinking that it would be cool to make something with oil, because oil is an interesting. I mean, I paint with oil, but that's a different kind of oil. It's like linseed oil. What about really using oil? I have not done it yet, but I could do something like that. I mean, in this case, obviously, whatever we do is affected by all sorts of things, right? I mean, and everything is of interest, at least to me. If you go in depth, you're going to find something. I don't think at this point I have been conscious about the relationship between the oil, the energy markets and the work that I do, even though I would have to think, because there might be a piece that might relate to something like that. But the idea, I don't see why not. I think it's something that would happen. I mean, the work that I did, it's not that I had a big plan about doing this. It's just that my life happened to, I go there and I'm finding these things. It's not that why did I did work about an earthquake? Because I was in the middle of one. So these things, I tend to respond to. I mean, it's weird. It's like, on one hand, there are artists that do work that is very universal and international and have those notions. I am always obsessed with the particular, the subcultural, the unique. I know that if I would be in Texas, I would be paying a lot of attention to particular Texans. I mean, the work that I've done in Texas has to do with Texas. But for some reason, I obsess on those things. I don't come here to do an abstract thing that would be universal. I come here and do something about Ozzy Osbourne in the Alamo. You know, I get, I mean, those are, I don't know. I mean, it's something that my mind sort of, I think I would do something like that given the right moment and opportunity. And now you're making me think about it. The pieces have a lot of contradictions. And there are issues. I don't know. The truth is when I did I remember one time, the show that I did in Royal Projects appeared in one magazine as one of the top shows in Los Angeles that year, whatever. And somebody posted that the show was very toxic, that it was very polluting, that flake pollutes, and that I was using carpet. And it's true that I use carpet, and it's urethane. Urethane is it's not a nice material, it's toxic. I mean, I guess my excuse is that at least I do it in a spray booth in the university, and a university that is particularly neurotic about environmental issues. So I have to go through all these, like, you know, we have filters and masks and all this. But it's true, you know, I wasn't thinking on that when I made those pieces. And then turns out that one of the scientists in the university, there's this Mexican Nobel Prize. I mean, he just died. But the Mexican Nobel Prize in Science, the only one that exists, that Mexico has to do with this guy that investigated the ozone layer. And the ozone layer gets to be destroyed by carbons that, you know, I don't think are exactly the ones that I use. I use urethane as a spray paint. It doesn't have the carbons that come in spray cans. But still, I'm talking to the guy and I'm feeling, oh, hell, I'm destroying the ozone layer that this guy was trying to save us from. Like, you know, what the hell? So, yeah, we'll try to address those issues. And there are those contradictions, yes. I will try to be more mindful. Yeah. Mario Molina is the name of the Nobel Prize. Oh, I was embarrassed. I didn't want to invite him to spray with me. Yeah. All right. A ver, Saúl.
It's very interesting to me how some very funny, humoristic pieces change within the context of the book, especially like the piñatas. I mean, they were like really funny in person. But here, like the humor is more, I don't know, the art. I mean, it's changing, and so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about humor in your work and how the humor has changed during the pandemic. Especially, I think the quote from your father at the very end of the book is very striking.
The quote of my father. Well, I don't know what to say. I mean, I think always the humor, well, humor is contextual, right? It's like how we usually say something in a particular, I mean, it has to do with timing. Where do you say it? How do you say it? But I think overall, if you look at the themes that exist in the work that I've done, I mean, the humor is serious. I don't know. I mean, I take serious humor. I mean, humor is talking about serious issues. Often we use humor to talk about things that otherwise would be painful to talk about. We use humor to talk about sometimes very painful things, actually. And so I guess that happens here. It's just that I guess in the book and during the time, the idea of death was closer. I mean, the book, in a way, I think, has to do with mortality and life. And so it's more difficult to see humor when you're talking about people dying and people that die. But I you know, for me, it's a little bit like the Day of the Dead. The Day of the Dead in Mexico, there's this idea that it's this beautiful thing and it's very lively and it's a big party and everybody likes it and let's bring the little kids. And it's true, it's that. But it's sad too. because you really, it's when you see you see the people that died, you see people that you loved. So it has these both sides, it's bittersweet. It's at least the way it's interpreted in Mexico. No? And you do the shrine. You have to remember the people, and so it has this thing. But I also think that, I don't know. I mean, the same way I would say it otherwise. Like, okay, humor has a tragic side, but I think tragedy has a beautiful side too somehow, because it's also rebirth. It's also, you are born again. Like, I don't know. It's also something that when you celebrate the death of a person, you are celebrating something that you also like. I mean, it has both sides. It's painful, but it's also kind of beautiful, I think. I don't know. It's at least to me, it's, so I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think this I just, listen, my sister one time wrote this piece for the Kronos Quartet. It was for Day of the Dead, because one of the sons of one of the musicians had died. And so somehow they called me because they wanted me to make an altar, to make a Day of the Dead show. And I told them that I was not interested in doing that they could get it, that there's people that make, there's people that make shrines better than me, that, you don't need an artist for that. What I told them was, however, that I would be more interested, that when they would play the song, it's like every time you play the song, just ask the audience to write the name of someone that died, that they loved, and put it there in the concert, like, just place it somewhere. And they would think about that person during the piece. They didn't like the idea. They thought it was too gruesome. They thought it was too painful, that it was painful, right? It's like, we're gonna have to deal with it. But that's the way it works, It's like, you have to deal with it, and the music is gonna sound way better. You're gonna see. All of a sudden, you're gonna see what the music is about. They didn't do it, but I thought that would be that's the way. I mean, that's what it is about, right? It's about to remember someone, and it's like that. Yeah, I don't know. Humor, again, yes, it's like you deal with these issues. Is it more serious? It is. Am I getting old? Maybe it's just that I'm getting older. I don't know. I'm hitting that age. I think I'm not as funny as I used to. No, I don't know. Hopefully not. Yeah. Well, all right. It's been a great session of questions and answers. The talk is more interesting than the presentation, the discussion. Yeah, so not a lot of people, but the people here, interested. Yeah, this is, for me, it's more interesting, actually.
Plus all the people out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for just.
No, but these dialogues. These dialogues, I think this is when art gets to be made for me, because then I really see what happens when you do these things.